60 seconds to comply.
I think you'd better do what he says, Mr. Kenny.
You have 60 seconds to comply. This is minute 14. Part man
Part machine.
or pod?
This minute begins with Morton saying, "The big leagues, Johnson," and ends with Murphy saying, "Role models can be very important for a boy."
I do like that line of Murphy's because I think it just shows you how much of a good person he truly is.
Yeah, this is basically Murphy being a good dad the minute.
Yeah, I think on that one, the notes I wrote up for in a part of our secret discussions, I think I even said, like, this is the Murphy and Lewis wholesome minute. Or at least it ends in the wholesome minute.
Oh, definitely, yeah. Doesn't start wholesome, though.
Oh, no, that's it. It's kind of interesting that, you really just get this collision of worlds between, like, OCP, dog eat dog, shark, big fish, small pond type of mentality. And then you get to the regular folk with Murphy and Lewis and the kind of, they're being friendly and jovial, and it's just nice.
I feel like if this was a Greek play or myth, it would start off with this minute, specifically. Let's focus on just this minute. You have the Greek gods and their machinations, and they've got plans of brewing. And then meanwhile, down on Earth, away from Mount Olympus, you got the mortals doing whatever, and shit's about to go down, but they don't know it yet.
Well, that's it, is the machinations are OCP. Morton specifically is saying that in the previous minute he set up prime candidates in high-risk situations. He's engineered RoboCop before he even got the approval, just in case. And I love the lack of empathy. This connection between Lewis and Murphy is really a counteract to Morton and, well, everyone.
Yeah.
Because Don Johnson...
But no, that Don Johnson, yeah.
That's never going to not be funny. Mentions about, that's Kenny, and again, Morton goes, "That's life in the big city."
Yep.
I don't get how he means that, because is it?
Yeah, dog eat dog, it's just sometimes you go to work, sometimes you get blowed up, and you don't come home. I don't know.
I always think, to me, people who live and work in a boardroom on the 40th floor of one of the most biggest corporations, there's always going to be a slim percentage there's going to be a killer robot on the loose that's going to kill you. I just realized killer robot that kills you is a bit redundant, but either way.
No, I like redundancies like that. Moon people from the moon. I don't even remember what that's from, some cartoon, but yeah.
I used to work at the redundancy department, the Department of Redundancy Department. Sorry.
Yes.
It wasn't worth the joke.
But yeah, they are absolutely ruthless, and I have to wonder if it's specific to this corporation, this corporate world, or is it the world of RoboCop in general? Is this a society without empathy? Because we've seen the news reports already, just people cheerfully reading off devastating news.
I think it's a commentary on corporate culture. I mean, that's pretty much a lot of what the OCP stuff is. It's like the filmmakers kind of, taking the piss out of them to a certain degree.
A few years ago, I was doing research into empathy. I began with Paul Bloom's writing on the subject. Very good stuff. And it's very difficult to actually know how empathy has changed over cultures, over centuries, because turns out the concept is very new. So the English word for empathy came into being only about a century ago as the translation for the German psychological term. Now, here we go. Einfühlung, I think. And that literally means feeling in.
No idea.
Yeah, the Germans, they have a word for everything.
Yeah, the only German word I know is Schadenfreude. So.
Yeah, well, there you go. They have a word for it.
That tells everything you know about the Germans.
But yeah, I went on this little down this little rabbit hole here because I was really curious to know, is there any sort of real world basis in that where you can engineer a whole culture to just be more empathetic or less empathetic? And
I would argue modern day culture has definitely been engineered to be less empathetic.
I'd actually say I think millennials and Gen Z are some of the most empathetic cultures we've seen in a long time.
I think that's more of a reaction to what society has tried to engineer. This kind of bootstrap culture, this, boomer culture, this whole idea of, if you just put in the hard yards and the effort and you become a self-made person, which is fundamentally bullshit, because it's the people at the top who are suppressing the people at the bottom. And
well, the very phrase "pull yourself up by your bootstraps" it's all you need to know. That's the irony. It's an ironic phrase.
I was gonna say, as someone that has bootstraps, it's not that easy.
Yeah,
you gotta
defy gravity. But we have seen throughout history there is swinging between conservative and very liberal and very loose. So early 19th century. So you think Jane Austen, all of that.
Progressive ideals and versus
Yeah, so around the time of Jane Austen, I mean, you see the dresses are much more revealing. Women used to wet them. You could see their nipples. They were doing drugs. They were gambling. They were doing all sorts of shit. It was wild, wacky, fun times. Then their kids grew up and went, kind of didn't like coming home from school and seeing my mum passed out because she's high or something. So they, in response, became very conservative. So that's where you get that idea of very buttoned-up Victorian culture.
So I just remembered an advert from, it must be like 1980, late 80s, like 89, and it was this, I think it was a Commonwealth Bank advert, and it was this family of, like, the mum and dad are, like, hardcore punkers, and their son, he's, like, dressed up like a conservative banker, and it's like, it's the whole, it's reversed roles, there's the counterculture versus...
Whatever your parents are doing, you're going to do the opposite.
Yeah, and it's kind of funny.
What was that sitcom that Michael J. Fox was on? Because that was basically what that was.
Family Matters?
Family Matters, yeah, because he was like the yuppie, he was the businessman, his parents were hippies.
Well, yeah, he was the young conservative. Essentially, Michael J. Fox was the era's Ben Shapiro.
Oh, yeah.
Holy shit, I had that revelation as I said it, and went,
So I'll go into my notes on empathy a little more, because I found this stuff really fascinating, and hopefully the listeners do too.
Yeah, please.
So the term only dates back about a century. It was from psychology textbooks from about 100 years ago, and even then it wasn't quickly adopted. So in the turn of the last century, English-speaking psychologists were throwing out different translations, basically because they thought, well, my way's right, it's pronounced GIF, not GIF, So they suggested animation, play, aesthetic, sympathy, and semblance. But in 1908, two psychologists from Cornell and the University of Cambridge suggested empathy, from the German name that I'm not going to say again, drawing on the Greek M for in and pathos for feeling, and it just kind of stuck. Now, at the time the term was coined, empathy was not primarily a means to feel another person's emotion, but the very opposite.
Okay.
I would actually argue this makes a lot of sense. To have empathy in the early 1900s was to enliven an object or to project one's own imagined feelings onto the world. So basically, it's like, projection, anthropomorphism, solipsism even. There's even early experiments, and even in the art world, where they were using the term empathy in a way that better reflects that idea of, let's see, one example was one subject imagining a bunch of grapes and said they felt a cool, juicy feeling all over. I love that. I'm feeling juicy.
I'm not going to try and crowbar this in, but I was actually going to mention a bit of the film about the Kuleshov effect, which is about associating imagery or two disparate images and forming a connection between the two of them. So it's actually a pretty good crowbarring of a segue, but...
Oh, yeah, so juxtaposition.
Yeah, well, it's similar to juxtaposition. Very much so, yeah. But what I was going to say is, interesting to say about how empathy has been changed. Because the other one I was actually thinking of, you reminded me of, is nostalgia, which was originally more of a negative connotation. It was, you're not supposed to be yearning for the past, and definitely more of the modern day thing is nostalgia being, a positive reminiscent of the past. But I think we should go with the original version of nostalgia, if only just so we could get rid of the nostalgia critic.
The PTSD critic, if we go with the original. Because yes, in World War One, I believe all these soldiers were experiencing PTSD, which hadn't been seen hadn't especially been seen en masse until then. And
Well, no, they experienced shell shock. They did not. PTSD did not exist, but no before, and no one ever had PTSD. I'm sorry, they clearly had that issue.
oh yeah, just men these days, such pussies. So
They need to suck it up. Ugh.
yeah, so just got derailed thinking about all that bullshit. But yeah,
Sorry.
fucking MRAs. So
That's yeah.
I think it was basically nostalgia, then shell shock, then PTSD. So I think we've basically labeled it the right thing. But it's so fascinating that these aren't new things. Everyone's always had empathy. Everyone's always had nostalgia or PTSD or any of those things. But we just didn't know how to identify it.
That's it.
And I mean, I could go on a huge tangent about cultural emotions, but it's fascinating to me.
Let's face it, our knowledge base has actually expanded tenfold, especially in the last, say, especially 50 years, but especially in the last, say, 20 years, with the actual internet has actually helped us enable to quantify a lot of stuff easier and it also allows a lot of communication as well, which helps for...
Well, yeah, we can see in a very real-time way how other cultures behave. You know, this COVID, not to date this episode, we're seeing how different cultures responded to the exact same threat in real time. And that's amazing. Like the kind of research that psychologists and sociologists and all that are going to be able to get out of this period of time will be unmatched compared to every other period of history.
Especially a period of history that is so well documented. Historians used to look to the scholars for history. They used to look to like the learned people, let's face it, the rich, the upper class, to get a sense of what the times were like, because they were the people that used to have more available writings.
Now you just have to go through the archives of Vine to know what life was like in 2014.
Exactly. Well, the problem with modern day archiving is access, because with everything being streamed in cloud, once those things disappear, unless there's a local backup on a hard drive somewhere, it's gone forever.
Praise re-uploaders and the Internet Archive.
Yeah, that's it. No, but you hit a good thing in there. You know, looking at Vine, the equivalent to that would be looking at the documentation of a stonecutter during, let's say, Egypt, like the guys supplying the stone or supplying the workers for works in the pyramids. Looking at their documents, you get a better sense of the lower level rung. You don't want to look at the pharaohs to see what life was like. You want to look at the everyday people. And
there's a really great scene from, I think it's the second Game of Thrones book, which I'm not, I guess, Clash of Kings, whatever. And Samwell, I was going to say Samwell, Tarly is looking through...
Yeah, I was thinking Samwise.
Yes, same thing. He's looking through the archives.
It's a long diatribe on potatoes.
He's looking through the archives and sorting through all this old documentation, and he's absolutely enthralled by these shopping lists, basically. It's all the orders for food and supplies and stuff like that, and Jon Snow just doesn't get it. It's like, who cares what people were eating 150 years ago? It's like, that's a really important thing. We can tell everything about the weather, agriculture, what cities were communicating with each other, import, export, everything, yeah.
Yeah, you get a good sense of what actual living was like, and it's amazing. Like the last century type of, even like the last 50-odd years of archaeology and all that type. Like people are focusing on different things and getting a better picture. And to tie this back to RoboCop, I think that's where modern day popular culture is going to be very interesting, because there's just so much shit to sort through. But we've already seen now, like, this is why I always bring up, like, whenever I've talked about, like, preserving physical media, like VHS and stuff like that. No one's preserving, the B-grade schlock horror things, because they were always considered low art. But everyone's preserving like the higher arts to the digital formats. A movie like RoboCop has got considered enough cultural clout to be preserved.
Yeah.
But the spin-off, like not necessarily spin-offs of RoboCop, but like maybe the parodies of RoboCop, they're just going to relegate to VHS, and that's why I kind of like to keep my shit My cheap VHS.
Yeah, Red Letter Media, they have access to movies that no one else does. They've been digging through the best of the worst. They've been digging through all these old VHS that no one's ever going to back up or... oh, sorry. I just remembered. I was talking to Mum and I mentioned Reanimator. Long story, I don't know why. Anyway, but I mentioned Reanimator. And she'd never seen it before. She's a big horror movie fan, but I'm trying to describe the plot to her, and I say, oh, this guy brings a cat back to life, and she's like, ew. And then a pause. Does he do it?
Not seen Pet Cemetery?
No. She's like, no, just, you killed my delivery. It was, ew. Does he do it? And I was like, yeah, but it's, a feral zombie cat.
Horror is one of those interesting things is because it's always been considered such low art for so long, but it's actually the fact of horror is actually pretty good at being a psychological reflection of society, anxieties like...
Oh, very much so.
Yeah, LGBTQI+.
Queer. We prefer queer.
Queer theory, yeah. Queer theory specifically as a analysis has so prevalent in horror, in the horror genre, which is amazing.
And even though RoboCop isn't exactly a horror movie, I would say that...
It has all her elements.
All those elements, and all that subtext, and all of... It's just... This movie just works on so many levels. It's so great.
Yeah, I know. It's also a great movie to repeat viewing, because it is so layered.
Which we'll be doing a lot of.
Well, we've still got, let me just quickly check the notes, at least 80 reviewings.
Yeah, so we do have real-world examples of societies in a very short span of time changing its overall empathic view on things, especially in China, where you have laws that actually make it preferable to, if you hit someone with your car, that you should reverse and make sure you finish the job, because if that person survives, you have to pay for their medical bills. I think you have to pay to support them for the rest of your life. And that is absolutely shocking.
Yeah, they have some of the weirdest things to technically make society better, but are kind of counterintuitive. You have like social credits. And yeah, you look at euthanasia and...
China, the euthanasia with, the one-child policy, which they've lifted a while ago. But because China wants boys, they don't want girls. So all these baby girls were being abandoned, aborted. It was horrific. And that is, I think racist people like my parents would say, oh, those people are just soulless monsters, they're not human, that all sorts of crazy shit. I think anyone in that situation where your rights are violated, where you are pushed to your limit, it's not that you have less empathy. I bet some of those people who were abandoning their own babies, who were running over pedestrians, they didn't feel good about that.
Yeah.
They were scared shitless.
No, it's because, you think of, like, say, the baby situation, they're culturally, and this happens in the West as well, it happens pretty much worldwide, they're culturally saying, you need a man to continue the name, to continue the tradition, you get...
It's a very real thing over there.
It's almost like there's a thing called patriarchy, Funny that.
But I was thinking maybe that's what's going on in Detroit in RoboCop, is that it's just change a few laws here and there, and I bet you suddenly see a very different side of people due to pure desperation.
I think that's one thing we don't really get a good sense of, at least particularly in this movie, is what is the political situation with old Detroit, especially, what has OCP done to old Detroit, God, that's something that'd be great to explore in a prequel series if they ever actually make it. I think this movie does heavily lean on the 80s trope of crime-ridden cities, city on the edge, and the one cop who's gonna save them. It's leaning on a very 80s narrative, but like this is essentially robot Dirty Harry to a certain degree. Dirty Harry, the original Dirty Harry wasn't really that. It was a different thing altogether. But instead, it's also adding a lot of this commentary.
That was a remake of Dirty Harry?
There was 5 Dirty Harry movies. But
oh, you mean the sequel, right?
Yeah, like the first Dirty Harry movie was a bit more conscious of Harry himself is not a good person, let alone a good cop. He is as much of a psycho, if not more so than was it the Boston Strangler in that film?
Yeah.
I can't remember. It's been a long time. But like at the end of the movie, he's no longer a cop. It's not the give me your badge and the gun. Like I think he throws the gun or the badge away. I can't remember. Again, it's been a long time.
Yeah.
But it's a symbolic gesture. Like this guy's stepped over the edge, but I think the idea is like Harry knows enough that he stepped over the edge, so he's no longer gonna be that kind of guy anymore. It gets all thrown out the window because by the next movie he's back to being a cop, and he's a bit more like Charles Bronson in Death Wish, but he has a license to kill because he's a cop.
So we don't really get too many civilians in RoboCop. We don't really know what the average person is up to or their moral philosophy.
I guess the only citizens we really truly see as a character, not just random bystanders, is maybe Ellen Murphy. Maybe. That's about it. Speaking roles, that's stretching it.
We know there's gentrification going on, there's unspecified crime. So, yeah, I think we are getting hints of a world that is probably not too far from what I was imagining when Morton just shrugs off a man's whole death. Just whatever, it's just a Tuesday at the office.
So now I'm going to crowbar in my earlier analysis. So Don Johnson says, when do we start? And Moore replies, when some poor schmuck volunteers.
No.
And then that cuts to the spinning gun. That is the Kuleshov effect. We're supposed to analyze that this poor schmuck is going to be the person that we're seeing spin that gun. It just happens to be our hero, Alex Murphy. I didn't notice that until this cut, Molly, because it's been a while since I've watched this as more of a critique eye. But I went, holy shit, that's a really good transition. Especially because, let's face it, the gun is also the thing that ultimately kills Murphy. He gets brutally shot to death, or to near death. And
I'm just thinking of the gun is good, and the penis is evil, or something like that. Zardos.
Well, phallic symbology is a thing, but I like the fact that the gun twirl is also one of those things that's set up early to help identify RoboCop to Lewis later on.
Yeah, I love this.
I can't wait to talk about that gun.
Yeah, I think we've got a lot of layers going on here. So,
it is a good counterpoint to say, like, we're down street level as opposed to high up. And also, the funny thing is, if you noticed it, the last shot we see of OCP is them descending, maybe into hell,
So, well, see, how I framed it was that, you've got the gods on Mount Olympus, and they're coming down.
Exactly.
And then, Johnson says, when do we start? And Morton says, as soon as some poor schmuck volunteers, and then cut to poor schmuck who won't exactly volunteer.
Yeah, exactly. That, again, that's a Kuleshov effect. It ties these two things together. We know that we're looking at that poor schmuck.
Mm-hmm. Love a good transition.
Beautiful. It's really beautiful. Yeah, I'm kind of gushing over an edit. I've been doing a lot of editing recently, so it's like, ooh.
Yeah.
That's really nice.
Editing is hard, especially if it's just you talking out of camera.
As someone who's vlogged in the past, I don't like being in front of the camera, but it's a necessarily evil sometimes.
I'm surprised. I'm usually reading off scripts for my podcast, and I like it to be very precise and sound like a narration for a documentary or something. But I think I've just gone to the point now where I'm so used to talking to myself that it's not that bad. Once they get going, I am fine.
Yeah, I kind of have the best of both worlds with Kung Pao because I do have scripted content, but then I tend to freestyle when I'm just talking about the minute, which I think allows me to, get the best of both worlds there, but also sometimes I go, oh God, I got nothing to talk about. And I got to vamp for at least kind of 10 minutes. I got to at least make sure the content is going to be semi-decent length.
Yeah, that's why I do in-depth research into related topics. Like, we did a deep dive into empathy today. That's how you pad out those minutes.
So my deep dive for this episode is, it's not that deep. It's a shallow deep dive. I was looking at the gun. I couldn't help myself. So Murphy's gun, because this is actually kind of interesting. So Murphy's gun is a Sig Sauer P226. Funny enough, most of the rest of the cops actually are using a different gun, the Heckler and Koch P90S. Oh god, I think I wrote it down. I'm not sure it's an S or a file. Let me just double check that. I do have.
Were you on the Internet Movie Gun Database?
Yeah, of course I was.
Hell yeah.
I do like it because I was curious because I was like, is this a Beretta? No, it doesn't look like a Beretta. It's a bit too short to be a Beretta. Yeah, so it's the Heckler & Koch P9S, which is actually a shorter gun. It looks more like a Walther PPK for the gun nuts. But what's really interesting is it comes up in later minutes. So both Murphy and Lewis both actually used the P226 in the cop shootout in the factory. But the gun that Lewis gives Murphy when they're driving is the P9S, but all the rest of the cops also have the P9S. And I realized saying it really quickly, like, it does sound like a penis.
Yeah. Sometimes...
That was unintentional.
Sometimes a P9S is just a P9S.
But this also comes into the fact of, like, I'm fairly certain the filmmakers, except for maybe things like the Desert Eagle, and there's another gun I would love to talk about that's not the Robocop's gun. That was actually a thing that was created specifically for the show. And again, it's also a Beretta. But we'll get to that several minutes from now.
But yeah, so Murphy explains that his son loves TJ Laser. The kid's name is Jimmy.
Yeah.
The most fucking unoriginal name. Come on, guys. But anyway, TJ Laser, a show that is definitely based on TJ Hooker, but way more fantastical. It's not just a cop. I think it is a cop show, but it's not that kind of cop show. He's more like a superhero. Yeah,
it looks like for lack of a better term, a super cop show. Like,
yes,
especially trained cops to take on the bad guys.
Which there were a lot of those in the 80s. I mean, Knight Rider is basically one of those shows as well. I've been watching that. Knight
Rider is essentially a cop show without a cop.
Yeah.
You know, it's technically more of a detective show, a PI.
What the hell is Michael Knight doing? Why is he being paid to do this? Who is paying him? Why? Like, Knight Industries it's like a technology company. Is it? I don't understand.
It's because a crazy millionaire.
Oh, okay, say it.
Because this is before billionaires existed. Walton?
Yeah, I think so.
Milton Knight?
Milton?
Yeah. Basically, his son died, which we find out later he's not dead. He got better.
Guys, I'm thinking of Garth. If you don't know who Garth is, Garth Knight, look him up.
Yeah, that's it. Michael Knight was a cop who gets shot in the face and clinically declared dead. He gets plastic surgery to look like David Hasselhoff, to basically look like the son of this rich dude, and he's given a smart car, not like a Elon Musk smart car, like a proper smart car, and with all loads of gadgets that are very convenient, and told to basically go around the country righting wrongs. It's basically the A-Team with less dudes.
Hang on, so you're telling me that a cop gets shot in the face, he has to be reconstructed, then he's paired up with some technology thanks to some corporation, if you will, and then he goes out and fights crime.
Yeah, I know. It's a unique premise, isn't it?
Yeah, sounds very familiar.
We just had to crowbar that in, didn't we?
Yeah, we actually had that conversation in Messenger, but I felt like it was too good to pass up. In fact, it's the only reason I mentioned Knight Rider at all, basically.
Are we gonna do a Knight Rider drop from now on? I don't know. I don't think I've got a soundbite of Kit saying shit, unlike our rest of our drops.
No, there is. He does. Or what does he say? I think it's in Knight Rider 2000 when he says to Michael he looks like shit or crap. I don't know, but we do have swearing Kit.
Yeah. Oh, you finally managed to track down a copy of Knight Rider 2000?
No, I just saw that one clip and it was pretty great.
Oh, okay. Insert clip here.
Yeah.
If I can find it.
You look like crap.
So TJ Laser has an iconic move where he twirls the gun, and it's this little shorthand that just shows, he's thinking about his kid. He's a good family man. He wants to just do that's just like cute little thing for his kid.
Yeah.
Okay, look what I could do.
But it's also a very iconic thing to this. I mean, I know as a kid, after watching RoboCop, I had toy guns. I would twirl that son of a bitch. Trying to.
I mean, what else are you gonna do?
Well, yeah, pretty much. I was a very boring kid who had no friends, so yeah, I couldn't really shoot anyone. I'm not American. Fuck. if this kind of thing, if you're a fan of this kind of movie, you get that gun and you twirl that son of a bitch. I've tried even twirling, like, some Nerf guns, not the big Nerf guns, but like, it just becomes a reflex where it's like, I've got a gun. Let's twirl that son of a bitch. Every toy gun.
So, TJ Laser is an example of a story within a story, which is a trope, I guess you could call it, that I really love, and it's a very interesting narrative style. And, I mean, it can be used for all sorts of things, but here, I think it's primarily foreshadowing and also allowing a bit of shorthand to know what's this guy like when he's at home, when he's with his family, what shows is he watching with his kid, that kind of thing.
Yeah, it feels a bit cliche, the whole let's put in the plot within the plot kind of thing. But I do think it's a great shorthand, especially because it's like, it says everything about this guy. Because it's like, he just wants to be a good dad and he wants to be a good cop as well. He's probably going to be a good cop regardless. That just seems to be the vibe of the dude. But the fact that he's like going, I want to show my son how to be a good person. And so I'm going to emulate his favorite action hero.
That is adorable.
Yeah, and what I love is also Lewis, she goes, pretty fancy moves, Murphy, and it's like, it's not condescending, it's...
Yeah.
For how much, I think I've said in the novelization, they're kind of ribbing each other a bit more, and, there is this almost instant camaraderie with a bunch of people in a shit situation who know that they're basically going out to die half the time.
Yeah, and I think why that works in this minute, why are we getting that read, is you got this really naturalistic dialogue delivery. He kind of stumbles and stammers, and then she finishes his sentence. They're maintaining a lot of eye contact, like a lot.
Yeah.
So you can tell that there's this instant mutual respect for each other.
Let's face it, if Murphy hadn't mentioned that he'd got a kid, which implies that that kid has a mother, they're literally just... Because this is still the first time they've met.
Yeah. It feels like they've known each other for a long time, but no.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. The subcontext, the meta narrative feels like, they've just gelled together so well that, it feels like they've been friends for a long time. But within the movie, because this is the first time Lewis has seen the gun twirl, so it's clearly that first day.
I just had this image of someone being... Sorry, Star Trek drop. Put the Star Trek drop in here.
Well, shit. That's exactly what I was hoping to spare you from.
Just had this idea of a Borg being assimilated, and the Borg next to them just turns and it's like I've known you my whole life.
I think that's an interesting thing when you talk about the Borg, is like, it's like, how does a collective hive mind work when it comes to familiarity? Okay, so all the X-Borg we know don't tend to, at least not seem to be semi-conscious of the reality of being a Borg.
Yeah, I think they've had some hand-wavy explanation of that much, that many consciousnesses in one brain would be too much to handle on your own, so they just don't have access to that or whatever.
That could also be just, a coping mechanism. Like, Picard talks about being assimilated and being aware of events outside of his own body, when he was Locutus, but he never talks about being connected, and we only find out about the Borg Queen connection in First Contact, but that's also because that was only just established. Like, he doesn't recognize Hugh as... because he asked the designation, so he clearly doesn't remember that type of stuff.
That would be way too hard for TV writers back then to have kept on top of.
I'm going to give him a gimme and say, the human brain isn't really capable of holding that much information.
True.
If you think about it as a collective mind, the mind of a hive could only registering a fraction of the information passed.
Well, I guess, all those brains are the processing power. So if you only got just one brain on its own, that's nothing.
Yeah, it's like acting essentially as a single neuron in what would a regular brain would be, theoretically. We're talking way too much about robot brains.
Yeah.
It's almost like there's a robot brain in this movie.
It's still relevant.
It's always relevant. We're going to crowbar Star Trek into everything.
Yeah, I haven't mentioned Transformers yet, so...
Oh shit, what are we gonna do now?
Now you have.
Now I have, I guess. Fuck.
We might have to put a moratorium on deliberatally crowbarring things that aren't relevant, at least to get the drop in there, but...
No, if it happens naturally, it's fine.
Yeah, that's a discussion for future Simon and Connor.
Yeah.
I don't care at the moment. I'm happy for that.
Who gives a fuck?
So, I've got some commentary notes, if you're interested.
Yeah, I don't think I had anything else on this. Well, I was going to say when he gives the line, role models can be very important for a boy. Again, really great natural delivery. So Murphy's all deadpan, and then Lewis starts to smile, and then Murphy smiles. And so that feels so normal and real and just like real actual people.
Yeah, the connection between these two is, it's so good.
Best buds for life.
Yeah, god damn it, Maggie Mayfish. Every single time I keep looking at some of these characters when they're standing together, and I'm just thinking, the similarities between like haircuts and costume designs and stuff like that, especially, after the boardroom scene, we're cutting back to the street level people, they've got short haircuts, same kind of cuts, same kind of hair coloring, same costume, uniform, stuff like that. I'm really happy to see that connection between these two characters.
Yeah.
It's kind of especially knowing what comes up next. We're literally like 5-7 minutes away from the horror.
Without that bond, I don't think the horror is as horrific as it could be.
Exactly.
And, well, we'll see that when we get to the remake of RoboCop.
Yeah, I'll definitely mention that. But yeah, having Lewis be a helpless witness to Murphy's execution, because that's literally what it is. It's an execution.
And she becomes this audience proxy where you just, if you were there, you'd be feeling the same, and you would want to do something but can't.
Yeah, we definitely will talk about that in a few more minutes. Just that moment is so nice and pure, and just watching it without the rest of the movie, part of just going, we could just finish the movie here. They're having coffee. They live happily ever after.
Yeah.
Maybe they get into a polyamorous relationship with Ellen, and they can have one big happy family, and then they can adopt TJ Laser, and
Yeah.
I don't know where I was going with that. I still would love to see a TJ Laser movie.
Yeah.
So speaking about relieving the tension, in the commentary, Ed talks about the medic line after Kinney's being killed. Sorry to bring it down.
I'm still not over it. Haven't moved on.
Yeah, he died for our sins. So he's talking about the death of Kenny, and the medic line being, it's basically a tension reliever. So I'll read the quote. A scene of violence that fills the audience with tension, then you give them a quick joke. They desperately need to laugh. And the bigger the tension, the bigger the laugh. It was a trope in like a lot of like 80s action movies, especially like the Arnold Schwarzenegger type of stuff. That's why he had the one-liner. He just brutally murdered like 100 people with a gun, and
So Evil Dead, basically.
yeah, well,
That's very early 80s, and the comedy horror dynamic, I love that.
Yeah, comedy and horror, it's the same like drama and horror. That's the whole idea of the two masks representing the same thing, essentially, is like comedy and horror are almost identical. It's just trying to get an emotional reaction from an audience. It's just, are you making them laugh or are you making them cry? And it's almost the same techniques to a certain degree. And but when you've got some high tension, you need a release, and laughter is a good release for that. I mean, I think that's why some of these modern day movies I really can't stand, is because, like, fuck it, I'm going to say it. There's movies like, say, Man of Steel, which is all about ratcheting up the tension and the stress and the seriousness, but there's no release. There's no comedy release. There's no release of the tension, even if it's just a wholesome scene or a Superman saving a kitten from a tree scene. It's just constantly, this is important, this is important, this isn't, for 2 hours.
Oh, that's absolutely the Stephen Moffat writing method. Doctor Who became so convoluted, so that was one problem. But also, everything was, here's the next big world-shattering event, and here's the next, like, you're not giving us any time to breathe, you're not giving us...
But Moffat used to write funny, what happened? Coupling was amazing!
Yeah, what happened? But isn't it interesting that the most remembered episodes from his run were not part of the big convoluted overarching story? It was Vincent and the Doctor, or Don't Blink, or the self-contained...
Blink was technically before he was the showrunner, and I'd say Blink, and Girl in the Fireplace, the things he used to write under Russell the Davis
Oh, yeah.
were far better than anything he produced in his run.
Yeah.
The only thing I can say that I really enjoyed of Moffat's run was probably The Day of the Doctor, and that might just be David Tennant.
Yeah.
My big band crush.
So, yeah, you make a really great point there that you can't just have all highs and none of the lows in terms of energy or tension or any of that, yeah.
That's also one of the problems with the Bay, or at least Michael Bay kind of thing, is like he's all about ramping things up. He does add humor, though, I'll give him that. Not good humor, but at least I think he understands that.
Yes, and that's why I would actually argue in my Transformers video essay coming at some point, I guess, is that Age of Extinction, the fifth movie, I think, in the series, or fourth movie. Fourth movie in the series.
I've lost count.
Yeah, fourth movie in the series actually has a really strong opening because it actually takes 40 minutes for the Bayhem to start. It's just Marky Mark and his daughter just doing stuff, talking, just setting everything up, and it's just like, whoa, what is this? What movie am I watching?
And then it turns into a Bay format.
And then it Bayhem, and yeah. But I would argue that it's one of the better ones.
Yeah, I'm still not going to watch it.
Nah, you don't need to. You don't.
I just live vicariously through your viewing experience.
Yes.
So I have one more quick note on the commentary. I think it was Verhoeven, I can't remember, but they were talking about the elevator shot, which we did cover briefly. So this was a practical shot of the elevator going down. It was shot in a real office location with a matte painting over the top. And they actually talk about how they did it, and it wasn't a optical, with that back to the time, an optical comp would be like, your green, well, more back then would be like a blue screen effect. More like how Star Wars used to matte paint and put comps in. A lot of that was just because they needed to have moving objects, like...
Yeah, like rotoscoping, or...
Yeah, to a certain degree. It was like, they had to... A lot of that was digitally... a lot of that was blue screened and stuff like that because they had to incorporate elements like, so like the Millennium Falcon docking into the Death Star is an optical comp.
Yeah.
They talk about how they did this on the film. So I think they used like really old techniques, how like used to get special effects done in the early stuff. So they'd like blank off one side of the camera, shoot a bit of footage, and then they'd switch the blanking and then shoot the other thing. So like, you could have like a speeding train in the background even though it was set on a soundstage.
Oh, interesting. Yeah.
Things like that.
Yeah, and, like the original Tron and movies like that, where I can't even wrap my mind around how much work that would have been. Because in Tron, they had to listen to Chronologically Speaking, the Tron Movies by Minute podcast with my pal Duncan. Yeah, he talks about how, to just do the light effects, they had to do so many different layers and separate all the different colors and just, holy shit.
Multiple passes. Yeah, it's crazy what that used to do.
We have it so easy now.
But Tron was about the birth of computer-aided design and visual effects. It just was very expensive, and there was computer effects in Tron. I think mostly it was just the light cycles. From memory, it's been a long time.
Solar Sailor and the recognizers, yeah,
because the suit stuff was animated, for lack of a better term. It was a digital composition, if I remember correctly. They just manipulated the imagery to get like those grays and those pops, those colors and stuff like that. It's on the DVD, but God, it's been such a long time.
Yeah.
So yeah, a lot of that stuff was done in camera, or at least it was done analog. It was done on film and comped on film and stuff like that. The reason I was going to bring this up because they name dropped the guy who did the matte painting, Rocco Joffrey. Not that one. And I was like, okay, because I want to make sure I got the spelling right when I wrote on it. So I actually went to the IMDb to look at the Robocop one, and a name caught my eye. It's actually top of the list on the visual effects on IMDb is a man by the name of Don Baker, and that rang a bell. I'm not sure if it's because I think maybe Adam Savage had worked with him or something, but it's just one of those names. I was like, hang on, he's done some other stuff. So I had a look, and funny enough, you mentioned Tron. He was the animating, composing camera on Tron. And he's also done some other special effects and some really good movies, including Batman and Robin, Ghost Dad, Masters of the Universe, and a little movie called Star Trek: The Motion Picture. He's done a lot of special effects. Looks like he hasn't made a film since The Core in 2003. But yeah, he was only a camera operator for his early work. But yeah, he's done a ton of special effects stuff. And he's not just done some shit films. He's also done some pretty damn good stuff as well, like, Batman Returns, Freddy's Dead, Hunt for Red October, Blade Runner. He was a camera operator on Blade Runner as well. Close Encounters, he was doing additional photography. So yeah, this guy's got a really interesting career. He's made some shit films, but he's also made some really good films. So yeah, how is that for a Star Trek plug?
Yeah, we got there in the end.
Yeah, I like your one though, because we got to talk about robot brains.
Yeah, and that is relevant, so it's allowed.
Speaking of robot brains, how's that for a segue? Gaslighting!
Yeah.
Alex, how do you feel? I feel fine, Dr. Norton.
So, more shooting. Just lots of shooting. Lewis is shot. Murphy calls for an ambulance. Yeah. So...
My one line is, RSVP Lewis, we literally barely knew ye.
Yeah, that's my main thing that I took away from these minutes, is that while there is more action, there are more scene changes and more drama, we're getting far less information from the remake than we were getting in the original film. Yeah, so we have an opening that will not be relevant for the rest of the film. Then we cut to almost no screen time between these partners that should be the central focus of a story about a cop. But it just amazes me that you can throw more stuff in. It's not necessarily going to make a better film, and nowhere is that better illustrated than here.
Yeah, it's like they added Lewis because they know Lewis was a thing in the first movie, but forgetting that the context of Lewis is the person that helped Murphy regained his humanity, not a plot device to make him into Robot Cop. Robert Cop. Too. I remember of Lewis in this movie is like, he's Murphy's partner, he gets shot, he ends up in hospital. I can't remember, he gets killed in hospital or something, and I remember watching this thinking, oh, are they actually flipping this on this head? Because we're actually getting this character that's somewhat decently likable, except that he's a black guy and can't be the black guy because clearly Robocop's white in the poster.
Yeah, because I was thinking...
Especially with that hand.
Yeah, but I was thinking, hang on, Lewis gets shot? Oh, this changes things. So then I thought maybe he was going to become Robocop, or at least they would consider him.
And then he's not appearing in this film for basically the rest of this 2-hour monstrosity.
And I like this actor too. I think I mentioned before that he was in Ghostbusters, the reboot, remake, whatever, remakeable, and
it's a remake.
Reboot makeable. There we go.
They wanted so desperately to be a reboot, but it's a remake.
Yeah, and he's just got a great screen presence, but he just doesn't get to do anything in any movie. Yeah,
I do remember liking this Lewis for the 5 seconds we actually get to any time of thing with him, but realistically speaking, one of my recollections of him is like, oh yeah, he was a guy who gets shot and then gets killed off screen, I believe. There's something to do with him being in hospital. I think there's an assassination attempt, but that kind of quietly gets dropped. Here's the thing. The emotional core of Murphy's Tale and the Robocop remake is the connection between him and his wife, which is absent in the original movie for reasons. So why not establish that at this point? Stop having been the cop on the edge bullshit. Actually have him being a family man. So when he does get killed, it's tragic. Not, oh, he just got blowed up in a car.
And this is a major problem with a lot of remakeable things. Yeah.
No, I really like that term, remakeables.
Yeah, remakeables. And reboot makeables, if you will. And yeah, that's a real problem, is that things are being used in the story as a, hey, do you remember that thing? Do you remember that other thing? Actually,
it's member berries.
Yeah, have you seen the YouTube video? This guy does a song about Ready Player One.
Oh no!
It's so fucking funny. If you when you're editing Simon, future editor Simon, yeah, you can put that, and it's just like, do you remember Back to the Future, do you remember this thing? Do you remember that thing?
Remember Akira? That's from Japan. Remember Galaga and Mrs. Pac-Man? Remember Contra? Remember Street Fighter? Remember the A-Team? Remember Knight Rider? Remember The Simpsons, seasons 1 through 9? Remember logging onto America Online? Remember Highlander and Highlander 2? Remember Star Trek? We certainly do.
I've been hearing things about Ready Player 2, and I think the I'm just going to refer to Thing gimmick as kind of worn off because people are calling him out on a lot of his bullshit now.
Good. But yeah, so in this instance, it's like, hey, remember Lewis? Lewis is in the first movie, so we have to use him. Instead of, when you write a story organically, it's, what am I telling this story about, and what is the central focus? And yes, it seems like they wanted it to be a drama about family, and I think that would have been really compelling. I thought they should have done that.
They should have done it 10 minutes ago.
Yes, so that's the problem, is if that's the thesis of your movie, if that's what your movie's about, you've got to do that in the opening few minutes. And I think, well, maybe you could do something with Lewis where, you know, they're bros, and maybe Lewis is going to go into this RoboCop project, and Murphy's like, no, I won't let you do that. So he offers himself up as almost a sacrifice. Something like that. Do something with that plot point. Otherwise, the partner character doesn't matter. Just focus on the family.
I mean, part of me is like, God, I don't want to keep going back to RoboCop, the thing. But the problem is, it's like analyzing this piece of media also makes you go, I can't believe how they screwed it up, but also I'm going, it does make me appreciate the original a lot more as well.
Yeah, I'm glad we're analyzing this, because I'm realizing just the magic that the original RoboCop does in really subtle ways in terms of structure and pacing and all of that. And but going back to the idea of RoboCop being about kind of a family drama, I love that, because that's something I'm really drawn to in superhero stuff as well. That's why I love the Fantastic Four, because it's really interesting to see, I guess, pairing the extraordinary with the domestic.
The ordinary, yeah.
And seeing how a family would deal with this issue of, you know, my husband's now a robot man.
Sorry, I've been silently giggling to myself because my brain immediately went to Christmas with the RoboCops.
Yes.
We're recording this the first week of December, so you know, the Christmas parody of that would be amazing.
Meaning I have to avoid the shops for a month, so I don't have to hear anything Christmas related.
Oh, we are 6 days into the Whamageddon, so yeah. Oh, last year I managed to avoid being Whamageddoned, and then I was at a charity event. And the first few bars of Last Christmas came on, I was like, you son of a...
Yes, just scream at the top of your lungs, staring up at the sky.
I was dressed up as a Ghostbuster at the time, so I really couldn't say too much. But then everyone was just like, what's wrong with you? And I went, it's Last Christmas by Wham. And then everyone else got it. It's one of those things, I don't like the song, honestly. It's not terrible, but it's not good.
It's a Christmas song. It's yeah.
It's funny how everyone else was playing Whamageddon, but they didn't recognize the song until I pointed it out. And I even got accused of that this year, saying, well, if you didn't point out I was listening to Last Christmas, like, but that's the point!
Yeah. But yeah, I think there can be comedy with a situation like this, and they absolutely could have done that. Actually, previous guest Luke, when he reviewed the remake of RoboCop many years ago on his podcast, Fruitless Pursuits, he did make a great point of, you know, the kid, when he sees his dad come home as a robot man, he should be like, cool, and be like, you know, can you pick up the car? Can you pick up this? Can you throw that? Can you destroy this can with your hand? And, you know, all that kind of stuff. And then, yeah, just the family's making dinner. It's like, do you eat? No, I don't. I have this sort of baby food stuff. Oh, okay. So then he sits down at the table with the chair breaks. And you know, later that night, his wife's just like, so how do we so I mean, you got that hand, so maybe we can start with
well, you're very good at twirling things. Do you want to give these potatoes a good whisking?
Yeah. So I think that could have been very humanizing. It could have been very endearing. This movie is just and this is what a lot of these reboot makeables suffer from the Han Solo movie, in which there's oh god, I can't remember the entire thing I said last time, but you know, my version of the Solo, where it could have been a comedy, it could have been something that breathed new life and made us love these characters even more than we already did, and then it gets neutered, and it's like, no, we can't have any humor, we can't have anything self-aware or self-referential or anything intelligent.
Yeah, oh god, it's... modern day remaking is cynical enough as it is. Not taking into account things like, say, 21 Jump Street, which is done tongue-in-cheek.
Love it.
Deliberately.
So good. That's why it's good.
I actually haven't seen it, but I was never a big fan of the original things, but...
Doesn't matter. It's... yeah.
I do need to get around to watching it. I will admit. That is one of those things I want to get around to watching.
Well, it took you years to get onto Prometheus, so...
Yeah, but... okay, I have no excuse for Prometheus. Again, this is why I love things like Kung Pao, which is like, you don't have to take things too seriously. You can take an old movie and parody it. And the funny thing is, I think when they try and do that as well, sometimes, like, I've heard, like, the Chips remake was that thing, like, we're just going to take this old thing and we're going to poke fun at it. But it sounded like the Chips remake was a lot more mean-spirited.
It really was, yeah.
And so it's like, no, you need to love these things. Steve Odekirk loves Tiger and Crane Fist.
Yes, absolutely.
You need to have a love of these things to understand the conventions and to understand what you're parodying.
Yeah, and I'm trying to think. I mean, there have been good remakes and sequels and adaptations and stuff. Well, I mean, actually, Tron Legacy is probably a really good example of this was made by someone who loved Tron and really wanted to do something that he felt it deserved to do at that point.
Okay, let's steelman this argument, and I would have gone with Blade Runner 2020.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Well, you know, the other Moves by Minute podcast I've been eyeing, yeah, I mean...
I couldn't remember the other two numbers.
2049. Yeah, yes. All of my podcasts, I just realised, are remade bucals.
Yeah, except this one. Except we're talking about the remake.
Well, sort of, yeah, half.
So I just did a little bit of math. As I said, we're recording this early on. We do have a bit of a buffer. This episode is actually going to be released the Monday before Christmas. This is technically our Christmas episode.
Oh, is this a Christmas special? Fuck. Do we sing the Star Wars song? I don't know.
No, I was just thinking, do I want to go through the RoboCop TV series DVDs that I finally owned a copy of and see if there's a Christmas episode in that?
Oh, yeah. But, yeah, because in the Star Wars Holiday Special, they actually put lyrics to the Star Wars theme song. So I guess we should do that with RoboCop. And I can't do that on the fly, but if I had warning, I could have done it, because I'm pretty good at that. As you've seen with my Who Gives a Fuck of the Transformers transition theme.
Oh, yeah, and if we want to go into deep lore, then you also have your Beverly Hills Chihuahua songs. Because technically, Christmas happens in this movie. We just don't really see it, because we see New Year's. The sequence where Murphy is transformed into literally RoboCop, it's implied, at least in novelization, to occur over about 9 months. Deliberate ties to birth, rebirth, but that's fine. We can bring that up later on. There is a New Year's scene where the Doctor kisses RoboCop on the lens.
Visor?
Yeah, because it's only implied that he's got one. Because it's, not... Yeah, it's a robot, doesn't need two. He doesn't need depth perception, at least while they're test bedding it. Yeah, so there is legitimate... There has to be a Christmas for New Year's, unless we're living in such a dystopian future in this movie that there's no such thing as Christmas. The Christians won. They declared war on Christmas. Mm-hmm. Yes, it was the Christians that started war on Christmas, not the leftists or the atheists or anyone else, because they love a Christmas.
Yeah. Godless heathens.
The godless heathens love the old religious practices.
Yeah.
It's the religious that hated Christmas. They started hating it back in the Victorian times.
Speaking of remake bucals and the ones that work, I really love the ones that just kind of feel like fan fiction. It's just a bunch of people who really love it, and they're just like, well, what if this happened? What if that happened? Like, you see it mostly, I would say, in comics, where they'll take an existing property, say Ghostbusters, Transformers, whatever. It's like, well, what if we did this? And no one can stop them, and they've got the budget to do it.
Well, what's his face? Kevin Feige is...
Feige.
The guy, Feige, yeah, the guy who runs the Marvel Cinematic Universe. He is a massive fanboy, and
That's why it works.
Yeah, he got hired by Laura Donna to work on the X-Men movies because she knew he was such a huge fan of the comics, and that's why, as much as those things really don't represent the comics, it has some of the stylings because they basically mined his brain to get some semblance of the comics in there. And then when he finally got the job at Marvel Studios, just like going, yeah, we're making like the idealized version of these characters to at least put onto the screen. So like, he's the first person in a while to say, yeah, let's try and get these costumes on there. Let's not be afraid of spandex.
Yeah, and that's a huge issue with, Bryan Singer, Michael Bay, Zack Snyder. They have open contempt for the source material. They're just like, this is goofy, I hate this shit, so I'm gonna just do my own thing and make this cool, in my opinion. And that never, ever works. Never once.
Yeah. If not open content, an absolute misreading of the source material, especially in Zack Snyder's case.
Oh, J.J. Abrams with Star Trek.
J.J. Abrams, yes.
He's not a Trekkie. He was basically using Star Trek as a platform, as a kind of resume.
To get Star Wars.
Demo reels. To get Yeah. He turned it into Star Wars. And
he was very open about that.
Yeah, very
He wanted Star
open.
Wars. He got it. Unfortunately. I do like Force Awakens. Just should have stopped at Last Jedi and should never been a ninth movie.
Last Jedi was masterpiece, yeah, and I always made that joke. It's really surprising that they didn't do a trilogy this time around. They just ended on that second movie with that really dark cliffhanger.
No, they did do a trilogy. It was called Force Awakens, Rogue One, and then Last Jedi.
Oh, true, very different, yeah. And then they went across to The Mandalorian, and there was nothing in between.
Nothing in between whatsoever. I can't hate on Solo as much as I pretend to, but I can hate on... Okay, so...
Why do I mention fucking Solo in every episode? I don't even like it. Maybe that's why I mentioned it.
So, where can our lovely viewers find you, Connor?
You can find me on traviandesigns.com, Travian. You can find me on patreon.com/traviandesigns, where you can get Prometheus by a Minute, Covenant Minute, and Tron Legacy Minute. And that's everything.
Every other minute.
Yeah.
Including Kung Pao, Enter the Minute. On Fanboy Crossing, just Google those YouTubes and find it on Simplecast, Google, Spotify, Apple. I think I've got it. And you can also find this podcast as well on Simplecast, Spotify, Apple, Google. You know it by now. If you're listening to this, you've probably found it on there. But, more importantly, share and enjoy, like, comment, subscribe, review, all that other lovely algorithmic stuff. But
yeah,
I hope you've enjoyed yourself. And we've got one more episode, I think, in this hellstorm of a year. And then hopefully onto bigger and badder pastures as soon as we get past the horrific murder of Alex Murphy.
And also, if you want to find more Movies by Minute podcasts, you can find them on moviesbyminutes.com. Shout out to Star Wars Minute, the guys who started this entire subgenre of podcasts. I just realized that we have never once given them credit on this particular podcast. I have done it on my other ones, but yes, I apologize for being derelict in my duties there.
I've never watched it. Pretty much my exposure to this whole genre has been Prometheus.
As it should be. Mine's the best.
I probably should listen to the competition.
There are 180 Movies by Minute podcasts, and if you don't find one on there of the movie you love, maybe consider doing that yourself. It's pretty fun.
That's what we've done.
It's a huge commitment, but it's a lot of fun.
Yeah, I mean, who would have thought some poor schmuck would actually go ahead and go, you know what, we needs a Movie by Minute podcast, Kung Pao Enter the Fist.
Absolute mad lad.
Yeah, God, that guy's a moron. God, I listen to him every week. I listen to him every day in my head. See ya.
Robocock.